All right, let's just dive right in. We're going to unpack one of the most jarring and, let's be honest, one of the most confusing commands in the entire New Testament. It's a phrase that, on the surface, sounds like it belongs in a horror movie, not a sacred text. I mean, listen to this. The Apostle Paul, a foundational figure in Christianity, tells an entire community to deliver this man to Satan. Just let that sink in. Those words are so shocking, they immediately raise 100 questions. So what in the world is going on here? Is he casting some kind of dark magic spell? Is this a biblical death sentence? To our modern ears, it just sounds incredibly harsh, maybe even evil. But to understand it, we have to kind of step out of our own world and into the world of the ancient Corinthians. So what did Paul actually mean by this? To solve this puzzle, we first have to get the context. This wasn't said in a vacuum. Paul was responding to a very specific and very public crisis happening in the church in Corinth. So here's the situation. A man in the Corinthian church was in a sexual relationship with his stepmother. And get this was an act so far over the line that even the surrounding pagan culture thought it was scandalous. But what really set Paul off was the community's reaction. Instead of being horrified, they were arrogant about it. Maybe they thought their tolerance was a sign of being spiritually advanced. Paul saw this as something way more dangerous than one person's sin. He saw it as a poison that was about to contaminate the whole community. And this brings us to the first huge clue. We need to crack this case. It's a concept that was just second nature to people in the ancient world, but it's pretty foreign to most of us today. It's the idea of sacred space. In the ancient world, think about places like the Garden of Eden or the Temple in Jerusalem. These weren't just buildings or gardens, they were understood to be places where heaven and earth literally overlapped. They were centers of God's presence. And because of that, these spaces had to be kept holy or pure. Letting corruption inside was a huge deal. It was a profound disrespect to the divine presence living there. So here's where Paul does something absolutely revolutionary. He takes this old idea about a sacred building and he applies it directly to people. He argues that the community of believers itself is the new temple. It's the new sacred space where God's Spirit lives. So the church isn't just a place you go, it's holy ground that has to be protected. And this shows us a massive difference in worldview. We tend to see sin as a private thing. It's an individual issue between a person and God. But in the ancient view, no way. A public, unrepentant sin was a corporate problem. It was like a toxic spill that could pollute the entire sacred community. And because of that, it demanded action from everyone. So if the church is this sacred space, then what's outside of it? Well, that leads us to our second key clue. Understanding the ancient map of the cosmos, or what some scholars call cosmic geography. In this ancient way of seeing things, the community of God's people was like a bubble of divine order and protection. It was reclaimed territory, a little island of light and holiness in a much bigger, wilder world. Being inside meant you were under God's authority and in His presence. And outside that bubble, well, that was seen as hostile territory. It was the realm of chaos, of disorder, and of rebellious spiritual powers. The name they often used to personify the ruler of this hostile realm was Satan. So for them, the world was quite literally split into two zones, sacred space and hostile territory. Okay, so now we have the two pieces of the puzzle, the idea of sacred space and this map of cosmic geography. When we put them together, Paul's shocking command suddenly snaps into focus and starts to make sense. This right here is the aha moment. Delivering to Satan isn't Paul trying to cast some kind of dark spell. It's a theological address change. It's the formal act of saying that someone, through their unrepentant actions, has chosen to live by the rules of the outside world, and so they are being moved to the spiritual territory that corresponds to their behavior. So let's just walk through the logic. It's a spatial transfer. The person starts out inside the protected, sacred space of the community. Then, the community performs this act of discipline, what we might call excommunication. This act physically and spiritually moves them outside, from the realm of order into the realm of chaos, where they are no longer under the community's spiritual protection. But this still leaves us with that really difficult part of the phrase. Why would this harsh act be for the destruction of the flesh? And how could that possibly lead to salvation? Well, believe it or not, the goal here is surprisingly redemptive. Now, this is really important. When Paul uses the word flesh, he's usually not just talking about our physical body. He's often referring to our rebellious, self-centered nature, our sinful patterns and habits. So the destruction he's talking about isn't about causing physical harm. It's about dismantling that rebellious way of life. The hope is that by being exposed to the harsh reality of life outside God's ordered community, the person's pride will be broken and the grip of that sin will finally be destroyed. And Paul makes the final goal totally clear. This entire painful process is done for one reason, so that the person's spirit might ultimately be saved. See, this isn't a final judgment. It's a desperate, last-ditch effort to bring someone back from the edge. So when we peel back all those layers, we see that the motivation isn't revenge or just punishment. It's all about transformation. It's a severe wake-up call, but it's born out of a hope for restoration. In this ancient worldview, this was seen as a difficult but necessary act of communal love that was designed to save someone, not condemn them. Paul really drives this home with one final metaphor. He says a little bit of leaven, or yeast, works its way through the whole batch of dough. In the same way, a celebrated unrepentant sin doesn't just affect the individual, it affects the health and the identity of the entire community. Protecting the community and saving the individual were really two sides of the same coin. And that leaves us with a really challenging thought for today. This ancient text kind of pushes us to ask a modern question. What if we reimagined our communities, our churches, our teams, even our families, not just as places we go, but as sacred spaces of trust and mutual responsibility that we are all called to protect?